I want to file this article under the least surprising revelation of 2024. Can you imagine this? Okay, picture if you will, your modern day SJW, to go ahead and dust off an old phrase. Somebody who is insufferably woke. Outside of them, obviously yelling and screaming until they're red in the face, tears streaming down their eyes. Would you consider them to be a fulfilled individual? Would you consider them to be an emotionally regulated person? No, of course not. But to finally come to the conclusion that woke people more likely to be unhappy, anxious, and depressed, I don't really think that you needed to run a study on that, but I guess I'm glad that you did, so now we can point specifically to facts and figures, but I guess to get the percentages and some of the underlying methodologies, well, that could be interesting, I guess. Psychological researchers in Finland have created an assessment to help measure an individual's commitment to principles of social justice and made some surprising findings across the Finnish population, including a negative correlation between progressive ideals and levels of happiness. Oh, so progressives in general are just unhappy. So funny, the first line is ignorance bliss, but you talk to your average progressive, I just thought them being ignorant was part and parcel of being woke, but okay. Their findings, published in the Scandinavian Journal of Psychology, suggests other Western nations may see similar patterns among their socially conscious citizens. Socially conscious, right. You say conscious, I say indoctrinated, tomato. Study author Oskari Latinen, senior researcher at Invest, a research flagship center at the University of Turku, remarked that woke discourse has since worked its way into Finnish discourse. Well, yeah, no, we can see everything. Like, Christ almighty, you guys voted for over in Finland. You voted for Sanna Marin, the party premier, or prime minister, rather, and how well did her tenure work out? Oh, right, she resigned in disgrace. The debate was largely data-free, and it could thus be considered a worthwhile question to study how prevalent these attitudes are. Oh, okay. A reliable and valid instrument existed prior to the study to assess the extent and prevalence of these attitudes in different populations, so I set out to develop one. Hey, good on him. Their research trajectory included extensive reading on intersectional feminism. Oh, this would be enough to just drive you mental. I could understand why you ended up coming up with markers for depression and anxiety. Having to read intersectional feminism, literature, critical race theory, queer theory, and other relevant basically anything that came out of the Frankfurt School and all of this postmodern babble. Relevant, yes, academic disciplines to inform critical social justice. All right. Pilot survey included 851 adult participants, most of whom were associated with the University of Turku. So we probably had a sample bias of being overtly woke. After refining the initial scale, the study was expanded to a more representative national sample of 5,000 participants, distributed via Helsingin Sanomat, Finland's largest newspaper. In the end, their final critical social justice attitude scale identified 7 truisms of woke people. Okay, cool. That's interesting. If white people have, on average, a higher level of income than black people, it is because of racism. Oh boy. This is Finland, okay? They're dealing with the exact same stuff. University reading list should include fewer white or European authors. Not the quality of the writing, but no, just the authors themselves. Microaggressions should be challenged often and actively. Yeah, that's some boilerplate stuff. Trans women who compete with women in sports are not helping women's rights. Reverse scored. Yeah, that makes sense. We don't need to talk more about the color of people's skin. But that's all they want to talk about. Hell, that's already read and baked into the first couple of questions. Anyways, a white person cannot understand how a black person feels equally well as another black person. It's my feels and my empathy garbage leaking in. And finally, a member of a privileged group can adopt features or cultural elements of a less privileged group. And then that's, of course, reversed scored, because that would just generally be, an appreciation for a culture. No, you're appropriating it, and that's bigoted and wrong. Okay, Nana. The gender divide was probably most surprising to me. Was it really? I mean, come on. Latinen told the SciPost the Finnish attitudes. 3 out of 5 women view woke ideas positively, with only 1 out of 7 men. I'm not shocked at that at all whatsoever. 1 out of 7 men? Yeah, I actually think that that's that's probably fairly accurate. And 60% of women, why do you think these ideas permeate so much? Just take a look at the demographics. Who's staffing, who's running universities in the modern day to really figure out why this stuff is so pernicious. This was especially true of women in fields such as social sciences, education, and humanities. Big shock, all of these feels and vibe-based studies. By contrast, participants who worked in STEM, and you notice how they're trying to make it into STEAM, okay, by changing it to science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. Don't let that happen. We're more likely to critique social justice efforts associated with being woke. Exactly. The more meritorious studies running up against the whole, yeah, I don't really care what you're feeling like. It's what can you provide for our field? Oh, a bunch of bitching and complaining. Yeah, you can go stand over there. That'd be great. However, the most concerning finding was the relationship between mental health and agreement with the scale. Oh, really? Here's the headline. Specifically, researchers found a high prevalence of anxiety and depression in people who believe the statement, if white people have on average a higher income than black people, is because of racism. More broadly, they found that those who identified as left-wing were more likely to report lower mental well-being. Yeah. And then more susceptible to tacit calls that the establishment can go ahead and fix all of your problems. Latin warned against extrapolating their findings to international audiences just yet. Well, I would say that any place that's generally speaking, an Anglo-centric society, like Finland is, that has been subject to mass migration, mass influx of Western ideals, I think that it's a fairly accurate comparison, but this is the author of the study after all. The studies were quite robust with a sample size of 5,000 people and good psychometric properties, Lattinen said. However, the scale would need to be validated in North American samples in order to know if these attitudes manifest there. I would argue that potentially some of those the acceptability of woke ideals might be worse the farther or deeper into the belly of the beast that the Western ideals go. Because you could have some more beta-tized men, because I don't know if you'd be able to find 1 in 7 men who would disagree with woke ideals. That would be tough. There's some that could go, well, there's a couple of things that we could do a little bit better out here. I encourage colleagues in the United States to study the prevalence of these attitudes in the country where they originate from. Yeah, exactly, because that in the 21st century, woke ideology, social justice activism, has been the biggest, if not most pernicious export of the West in the past 20 plus years. It used to be, Western culture was the bestern culture. Television, movies, fashion, that used to be the exports of Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. But now it's this overarching anxiety, depression, general unhappiness with you always trying to find social equity, always just trying to redistribute societal ills in order to make sure that underrepresented groups, marginalized groups are properly taken care of. Unless, of course, your definitions of marginalized group include, the smaller proportion of one said group, like men being the underrepresented sex on a global scale. But no. When you get too macro like that, we just can't talk about social justice like that. It's only about making white people feel bad about the sins of their great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers in some retrospects. Meanwhile, diminishing their ability to facilitate their congregations in the modern day. They will, to harken back to an old meme, they're going to complain about capitalism on their $1,600 Apple iPad or MacBook Pro. Type away on Twitter an app owned by an African American and complain that Elon Musk is a racist. These aren't well people. And now we have studies and metrics to go ahead and quantify that and to really drive home the point that, oh yeah, if you're woke, it is in fact a mental disease. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. From the gift of your time or for the gift of your time? I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.